Hello and welcome to DudaCon 2023. I'm Nick Ranger and I'm so excited to be hosting the very first of Duda's 3-day virtual sessions where agencies gather to learn about how to build their strategy for growth in the age of AI. This year, DudaCon is sponsored by none other than two absolute pillars of the SEO global community, SimilarWeb, who are allowing marketers to analyze the competitive landscape and search engine journal, the SEO authority. Duda has some incredible content, so if you haven't already subscribed to Duda for cutting-edge conversations, webinars, and insights with the SEO community's best and brightest, hit that like button. And if you're loving DudaCon, also go for that subscription for the notification bell. That would be really great, so you get to see any new video releases as they come out. To kick off our very first online conference session topic is SEO dead, what AI means for clients for their SEO strategy. We have three incredible guests who I will probably introduce momentarily because it's DudaCon, I just want to touch base on the next two sessions over the next 2 days for this 3-day event. So tomorrow, we'll be deep diving into your 3-year business plan, winning agency strategies in the age of AI. And this is where we'll be leading agencies will be able to share how they're responding to the challenge and opportunities of AI. And for the final day, the closing keynote will feature an exclusive with Duda's founders on building a future-ready web platform for agencies, where they'll be able to share some incredible insights on how Duda has incorporated AI into the platform, and of course, what's next. So without further ado, I'd love to be able to introduce these phenomenal guests. I think, our first guest of our three that will kick off DudaCon. I mean, this guy, he needs no introduction, really. I'd love to introduce Barry Schwartz. For anyone out there who has been living under a rock, Barry, you're a living legend within the SEO community. He's the CEO of Rustivic, a New York web service specializing in customized online technology that helps people be able to cut costs, increase sales. He's also the founder of Search Engine Roundtable and has covered search for the last 19 years. Thank you so much for being here, Barry.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. It's a great session. I'm looking forward to the Q&A section.
Me too. And of course, next up we have Gerald Murphy. Gerald, you actually fell into the world of SEO after studying information retrieval, which I love. You were studying information and wasn't necessarily aware that the SEO industry existed, but now that you're in it, you love it, and I love that for you. He's a prolific documenter of SEO publications in Search Engine Journal, and he's been, over the last 7 years, worked with software, and of course, here today at SimilarWeb. Hey, Gerald.
Hey, Nick, and good to be speaking with Barry and Bart.
Awesome. And of course, speaking of Bart, Bartosz Góralewicz, he is the founder and head of SEO at Onely, and of course, the co-founder of ziptie.dev. Great little indexing tool there. He's been a staple of the SEO industry for the last decade. He has been found all kinds of really awesome, wonderful tools, which I love to use, and is also the co-founder of Elevate, 2018's best small SEO agency in Europe. And of course, he's a prolific thought leader, especially when it comes to all things JavaScript SEO. And he's the one that's going to be taking us through a wonderful deck today. Say hello, Bart.
Thank you so much, Nick. That's a beautiful introduction, and I'm honored to be with such a wonderful crowd here today.
Awesome stuff.
Can't wait to geek out into some technicalities, but I'll try to keep it digestible.
100%. And of course, my name's Nick Ranger. I'm a senior technical SEO at Design Marketing, and I'm really excited to be here with this wonderful, illustrious group of people. I think without further ado, I think let's just get right into the deck and start sharing insights. Of course, if you have any questions, please feel free to pop them into the chat. We love an active chat. We can see heaps of people from all around the world tuning in, which is wonderful to see. So look, we've got a wonderful guest panel here today. So pop in your questions and we will absolutely get into them after this. Bart, do you want to take it away?
Yeah, just let me get back in focus. Okay. Oh, that shouldn't happen. So we have first technical issues behind us. So let me start with basically a little bit of intro. Today we're gonna go through the new era of AI. Just after I get back in focus again. And we'll go through some of the latest changes at Google with SGE layer and all of that. I'll try to keep it very digestible. I'm not gonna geek out as much as usual. So let's dive right into it. My name is Bartosz Góralewicz. I've been introduced beautifully already, so I can skip this slide. I run Onely. Onely is a technical SEO agency with a huge R&D team, and that's something we take a huge pride in. And we've got this research on SGE. But before I go through what SGE is, I figured the best and simplest way is to basically show it live. It's not gonna be fully live, just in case, but I've got a pre-recorded. Oh wow, sorry, my PowerPoint is really eager to get started today. So let's have a look at how SGE, so Search Generative Experience, looks like. Basically what that means is that Google changes the layout of Google SERPs, search engine result pages, to kind of enrich them with AI. And let's see how it looks like in the wild. Hopefully this demo is gonna be working. So if you have SGE enabled, you have to apply for that from a private Gmail account. You can search for anything you like and you will get these results. So here I'm searching for best noise cancelling headphones. And as you can see, this is a different experience. That's something that we're used to with regular SERPs. Not only we have a huge list of headphones, but we can also peek into sources and stores offering these. So that's just one of the examples in the e-commerce space. And I want to show you something that's very close to my heart here in Texas. Hopefully, again, oh, wow. We did run a lot of tests of these videos, but as it always is. So not headphones. Here we go. So as a brand new Texan, I'm learning how to smoke. So if we want to search for how to smoke a brisket on a Kamado grill, we can see how this experience looks like. And it's a very, very immersive experience nowadays with this new layer. So not only you can see a lot of info, recipes kind of ready to go, you can see YouTube videos, but then you can ask follow-up questions with whatever you like. So for example, what temperature do you have to use? How do you start a grill if you're really beginning? And how do you do all these things? So if you look into this, even if you don't like some of the results, you can always go back. It's a very conversational approach. And you can use any of the other suggestions from Google. So with that, you can see that this is a huge shift. It's a huge change. Hence, a lot of people, again, as every 2 years in the SEO industry, say that this SEO is dying. I don't think that's the case, but let's look a little bit under the hood of that SGE layer. So what that actually means for your company, whether you're an agency, maybe you're in-house, let's look into some of the data. So what we've done is we've been researching both machine learning and AI since 2014, when Google announced, and I remember that in, I think, 2015 or 16, that by 2024, Google's main product will be AI. So when I heard that, I was like very skeptical. I didn't really believe that, but we started really researching all things related to both machine learning and AI at both Google and Bing. So what we've done a few months ago when SGE was released is we've built a scraper and a team that basically analyzes all the SGE results on a weekly basis. So now I think this is the most important thing. Right now, looking at the data, looking obviously at popular queries, we have, sorry, there's a lot of technical difficulties today, even though we had all the checks. So SGE is generated for 75% of queries, which is astonishing for me because this is the fresh product. This is an experiment. And for it to be so deeply engraved in Google was kind of shocking to me to see. especially that if we look at the spread, 55% of our queries had auto-generated responses, so you didn't have to click converse. And for 20%, you actually had to force Google to show you SG response. And why is it important? Like, some verticals are more affected than others. In e-commerce space, it's 96% of e-commerce related queries that have SG results. We'll go through some of the examples today, but that basically shows if you're in the e-commerce space or you work with someone who's in the e-commerce space, that might be really something you have to look into very quickly. And some verticals are safer than others. And that's actually, I know for some of you, finance doesn't come as a shock, but you will see why I think it's quite interesting. So out of these, there is one vertical that Google seems to be a little bit afraid of, I'm assuming for legal reasons. So finances and investments only have 22% of SG results, which is quite interesting. And finance is just one of a few exceptions. So there are not too many exceptions to that rule. We'll go through that in a second. And that's something where I think we're going to have an exciting conversation with Barry after this part, because Google seems to have no boundaries whatsoever. They go after your money, your life. So if you Google cancer-related query or suicide-related queries, Google will show SG-enabled results, which is quite a shock because, first of all, we as SEOs are kind of being judged differently by Google because we need to meet a lot of criteria to actually publish anything about these. And the second thing is health. So as I mentioned, both your money, your life and health seem to be really heavily targeted by SGE, and basically breaking their own rules of authority and stuff like that. So let's go into some of the verticals. I feel like this is the most exciting part for me, at least. So investing, as we already established, it's not really something that Google is really pushing heavily into. However, medical is 81%, so 81% of medical queries have SG results enabled. SEO-related queries, I'm assuming you might be interested in that for your agency's sake, they have 88% SG coverage. E-commerce, as I already mentioned, 95%. And time-sensitive queries like when or news-related queries have fairly deep penetration of these results as well. In-person visits are 98%. And lastly, simple, how we pronounce it, is also 54%. What's actually quite interesting to me, what it shows that Google is really heavily embedded in verticals where they have a lot of data. So in e-commerce, the data is very well structured and it's very easy for them to show it. Same for like in-person visits or queries like this. So we can see that Google is heavily leveraging their database. So there are some triggers that will get you a success with SGE more often than others. So how best cost near actually is in our database is 100%. I'm assuming there are some exceptions, but we haven't found any yet. And buy. So that also shows that wherever you have the strongest database or knowledge graph, Google is very eager to show SG results because they have higher certainty of these being correct. And few exceptions, and I think these are quite interesting. So I don't think Google wants to touch COVID queries. And I think this is quite interesting. To answer the question on the screen, we analyze something around 20,000 queries per every 2 weeks. And sometimes for some of the projects, we go with deeper checks and we aggregate them. I hope that answers the question. And queries with the phrases side effects or weight loss. So I'm assuming there are some legal aspects at play where Google cannot really or doesn't want to touch these verticals. But outside of these, most of them are fair game. And yeah, some specific drug names also are something that Google doesn't seem to be touching, like Ozempic-related queries. And SG keeps growing. That's actually something that's the most shocking for me because we've been doing R&D for 13 years now, and I have never seen something moving this fast. And not only at Google, I don't think I ever saw a company moving a product as fast. And let me show you a few examples. So currently, as I mentioned, we have 75% of queries returning SG results. But only a few months ago, that was 67. But also, if we go into some of the verticals, I'm gonna go through verticals as well, but also the length of that content is expanding Like it keeps on expanding quite a bit. And as you saw in some cases, these results take up a lot of space. Yeah, let me show you an example. So this is an example from today. So how to, oh, I have no idea why this happens. So this is an example of how to build a website. And as you can see, you have do that underneath. I didn't even click show more, and my whole screen on the desktop is covered with SG results. So organic results are really pushed down quite a bit. Oh, and yeah, that has changed recently as well. So in the very early days of SGE, these pages were very thin. Now it seems that Google is expanding this product quite a bit into the SERPs real estate. Moving forward. And these journeys are really deeply immersive. So sometimes when you search for something, you, especially top of the funnel queries, like how to buy a bike, how to cook a brisket, how to do something like this, you can go through the whole journey not leaving Google. So that's actually quite interesting to see. Originally, they only had like a query and a few follow-up queries. Now this creates a very well-designed journey. And I guess the next question after that would be, is SG ready to launch? And there are a few things that are not working as good at SG, and let's go through some of the examples, because I guess at this point you might have the idea that SG is going to take over within the next few days. It's not really the case. Fortunately, we have some time. And I love this example because we can see that the featured snippet, so the query, if you don't see that, is how tall is George Bush? Which you would say is a very simple query to ask. I don't know the answer, but I'm assuming Google does. And if you look at the featured snippet, it's actually fairly clear. However, the SG response seems to struggle with that quite a bit. And first of all, what we're seeing is I'm too short to be a president. But secondly, none of these answers here actually meet my intent. So we have a lot of these examples. That's also one of my favorites. We have hundreds of these examples, but how often to audit SEO? And each of these bullet points is a different frequency of these checks, from 2 to 4 times per year to quarterly to every 3 months. Basically, you can see that Google kind of struggles with this query quite a bit. And that's one of the next examples. So Google got really good at deeply understanding the intent, even though this query is technically answered properly. So you know how to count real estate investments. It doesn't really show you what we're searching for, so just the calculator itself. And I feel like these experiences of embedded tools within SERPs are not coming anytime soon. However, we can see that Google doesn't really understand that intent well. I apologize. And yeah, moving forward, the biggest issue right now of SG, and I think this is something that has to be addressed quickly by Google, is that the SGE game is not really fair. And I feel like not only they're looking at multiple lawsuits if they don't address it, I feel like this can come with a lot of consequences for Google as a platform as well. And going through some of these, source attribution seems to be a problem. Very often Google will quote content from one website, even though it's not really, it doesn't belong to that website. So first of all, source attribution, basically copyrights, are something that SG is not dealing with well. Plagiarism and a lot of examples online, and I think Barry can tell us a bit more about these. Outdated information, even if we're asking about the price of something, sometimes Google will show a price from 3, 4, 5 years ago. So this is also something where we have to be really cautious about that. Irrelevant information, issues with product recommendations, and this is one of the biggest ones, conflations of opinions and facts. So sometimes when searching for something, Google will kind of merge comments, opinions, reviews with hard data about a product, as an example. And creation of unfair competition, because again, we're playing by a different set of rules. Being on Google as SEOs, as website owners, as webmasters, some things wouldn't fly with Google well, like publishing an article about your money, your life without an authority. Google can easily do that. You can read more about this in Tomek's article, linked on the screen. So let's look into a little bit of lunchtime timeline speculation. So first of all, so one more thing I wanted to mention is between July and September, Google already increased the number of these SGE-related queries quite a bit. So not only transactional queries grew 30%, and we can see, I'll show an example of iPhone in a second, but we can see that all these verticals are growing quite a bit. So we can see that Google is pushing a lot of resources towards SGE, most likely because they are competing with Bing AI. This is a big deal. This is one of the rare moments of search engine wars going live. So looking at the milestones of what has to happen before we see that pushed live worldwide. So before the global rollout, we're actually right now at the stage 3. So Google already pushed SGE to Google Labs in Japan. Just recently, a week or 2 weeks ago, Google Labs in India. And I assume that they either will launch more countries or they will just launch worldwide labs, and then we can see that launched in search engines for everyone. So we still have a little bit of time, but we can see that Google keeps testing. So what we see today will most likely change quite a bit. And every single time we run a check, every 2 weeks, every week, we can see that they added new features or they removed some old ones. For example, sources in the middle of the text. They've been there originally, but they kind of changed the layout. They play with how to improve that experience very often. And now the most important part, how can you prepare for what's coming? So first of all, what we see is if you have issues with crawling, indexing, rendering, you most likely will struggle to be included in SGE. We'll get into some of the technical details in a second. What you can do, what we do for our clients, is we track SGE answers very often to see how this trend is changing. And we have few accounts, few clients that will most likely not be affected by this change deeply, but we see a lot of high-risk accounts, especially with top-of-the-funnel content, that will be affected by this change quite a bit. And now I have a little bit of an example with how to create digestible content for AI. So that's something we've done just recently. Oh, I'm sorry, I don't know what's happening today with my PowerPoint, but I'll get to that in a second. But first of all, what we can do as of today is we can predict exactly which keywords and what percentage of your keywords will be affected by this rollout. So we can see that this is one of our clients. For this account, we see around 65% of very high or high probability keywords driving most of their business. So that's something I highly recommend doing and checking that on a weekly basis, because if you see that your accessibility is very high, I would really try to build a plan to address it ASAP. And who gets to be in SGE? Let's go into some of the ranking factors. First of all, the number of sources listed in the top right corner keeps on increasing. And with the last update, as the one I showed at the very beginning of this presentation, we saw that sometimes they will even show up to 200 sources. But the average number of sources is growing. And I feel like this is Google's way of approaching the issue of, okay, what are the sources of these elements of text? I feel like this is how Google tries to address the copyright issue. Secondly, some of the responses, again, have more and more pages listed as source, and that brings a lot of challenges with optimizing for these. So if you look at this by iPhone query, we can see that it's really difficult. It changes the whole experience of SERPs, because not only you have a lot of these carousels, you have that merged with local listings here in Austin. Let me just stop scrolling. And you can see that every single one of these arrows goes and gives you a different experience. So that's a very dynamic experience, very difficult to optimize for long term. So I'm wondering if it's going to stay this way. Let's talk about SGE sources a little bit more. So first of all, with this new rollout of 200 sources or more, we see a lot of sources not really ranking for the given query, even in top 100. So if we look at that, 43% of this latest experience launched recently, 43% of sources, they don't rank in top 100 one bit. And 10% rank beyond top 10. However, now it gets tricky. If we look at only the sources that rank within top 100, it's 80%. Let me go to this chart. So basically, if you have sources in SG that already rank within top 10, this is the distribution. So we can see that basically being very high, ranking very high, I have no idea what's happening. Ranking very high for these queries can help you get into this SG layer. So as you can see, 80% of all the sources from top 100 are position 1 through 10. So that's crucial. So still ranking organically is a huge factor to get into SG. And who gets picked in sources, that's one of the crucial things. So first of all, what we've done is we've analyzed all of the sources listed in SG, and we compared that to the similar queries without SG to see what's the ratio. And first of all, from the same rankings, the pages that were included in SG had 10% more content. So we can see that here, basically SG source, non-SG source, you can see that basically for especially top 3, top 4, the length of content seems to matter. I don't know if this is a ranking factor. I wouldn't go this far. Maybe it's just a correlation, but that's an interesting finding at this stage. And one more thing that kind of plays a big role, and I think this is crucial, is your content has to be easy to digest. So what Google doesn't want to include in SG is quite interesting because they don't want to include forums, Quora type of content. So if your content is user generated, most likely the SG layer will have struggles with digesting it. And that's an example of Quora. So I Googled how to fix a broken zipper on Quora, and this is a long page. Like, I really struggled to get the answer. So what we've done with one of our projects is we have experimented and we exported the whole content from this page into ChatGPT, and we've created a summary that we hand fixed later on to see, okay, with these summaries, Google is actually way more interested in this content to include it in the SG layer. So if you have a lot of user-generated content or auto-generated content, summarizing that is a wonderful practice to be included as a source. Yeah, and the last thing that actually kind of changes your chances of being included is the weight of your code. So what we've seen first with our experience, and later on we ran a lot of tests, is heavy JavaScript pages, or basically heavy pages, don't seem to be included as often as pages that are very lightweight, especially when it comes to scripting and rendering cost. So that's something to have in mind. Not only that's going to help with your technical SEO and your indexing, it's also going to increase your chances of being included in SG quite a bit. I feel like this is a very good, very interesting point. So just going through some of the key takeaways. So first of all, SG is coming and will change how users interact with search quite a bit. Secondly, some verticals are more susceptible. So if you're an e-commerce website, I would really look into this and try to figure out how this is going to affect you. And if you're in finance, maybe you still have a little bit of time. And the key at this stage with the level of research we have is you need a lightweight page with clear, concise, and well-structured content. That gives you a way higher chance of showing up in SG. And lastly, you can already estimate with a lot of research, even the one available on our website, you can estimate exact impact of SG on your website, and you can see if you should really do something and try to prepare, experiment with different solutions, something we do, even though it's very dynamic, before it's fully rolled out. And you have time. I don't think it's going to be launched within the next 2 or 3 months. I'm not sure, obviously, but that would really be madness. So you have still time, so start prepping as soon as possible. And some final thoughts, because I know, talking to a lot of website owners throughout the last few months of SG, I've noticed that we can divide the crowd, probably here in this virtual room as well, into 2 groups of people who are extremely panicking about SG and have a lot of anxiety, and the other group who's like, this is not going to affect me. We don't have to worry about this at all. I haven't met the middle ground very often. So I feel like, first of all, instead of going to any of these two camps or groups of like, this is going to be crazy or nothing is going to happen, I would really start to look at data, see which keywords are affected and how you can creatively get out of this using the data here as well. And that's it for now. Thank you so much. Let's go into the Q&A. Thank you for watching, and let's go through questions.
I just want to say, before we get into questions, I'm so glad that this is recorded, because I think for everyone that's listening right now, there is so much information and so many wonderful little experiments and tests and a lot of wonderful detail that just begs to be dredged and explored even further. But we've only got a short amount of time. I'm mindful of all the people that are watching right now. This is for agency owners and SEO specialists alike. So I think what we can really do off the back of that fantastic presentation is really just be able to help them conceptualize these changes and what they mean for their everyday practices. What this means for them, how to measure, how to communicate, and how to track that for their clients, and how to be able to like really make sure that when SGE gets rolled out, if for whatever country or however it does, it's meaningful to them. I'd like to actually go and take the first question to Barry, because I'm really interested to get your thoughts as someone who has their finger on the pulse. Something that you have been capturing is around when Google will default to the new SGE search interface. A lot of things are sort of going to be concluding in the US December 2023, in India February 2024. I'd love to get your just initial thoughts on what your take is on this.
Yes, everybody wants to know when SGE will fully roll out. It's hard to know. I mean, we have those two clues. When you go to the labs version, it tells you in the US, the SGE experiment or labs will end December of this year, and the India and Japanese version will end in February of next year. That doesn't mean it's not going to launch before or after or whatever. We really just don't know. And people I think understand. I was speaking to somebody this week, and people have to understand that this is not going to be something that people go to or select to go to in the future. This will be the new Google search. People think it's something they're going to go to because it's a labs experiment. It's separate. It's not going to be separate. It's going to be the new Google search, whatever this is. So it will replace what is there. The cool thing is it's just that little area above. And the question is, how often will it trigger by default? I know Bart, went through a lot of data on that and showing you right now how often it's triggered by category. And a lot of that matters. But as Bart said, it's changing constantly. And what triggered yesterday might not trigger tomorrow, and how it triggers, or if you have to hit generate. So we just don't know in terms of when it's going to go live. I do think my gut feeling is it will be not sooner, later than sooner, meaning probably closer to December than closer to where we are now. Watch it go live tomorrow fully. I doubt it, but I really do think it's going to be later on in the year as opposed to like today or sooner, closer to today. Just because I think there's just so many things that people are looking at and saying how embarrassing it is for Google search to show these things. I know Lily Ray came up with a bunch of examples every day. Just when Google launched feature snippets in the early days, we saw so many embarrassing cases of the responses that Google was giving in those feature snippets. We're seeing the same thing kind of roll out with SGE. And I think Google's taking all this feedback in and trying to reduce that embarrassment as much as possible before it goes out of beta, because once it goes out of beta, then it's really like a real product. And Google can't just say, oh, it's beta, it's not our fault, and just slap on a label there. So I think later on in the year, as opposed to, I know we're at the end of the year already, but I'm saying between September and December, probably close to the end of December, in my opinion.
Yeah, I really liked how, Barry, you connected it with SERP features. Like at the end of the day, when you think back of SERP features and when they came about, 10 blue links to SERP features, rich content. And now it's just a case of how does that world evolve? And I think this is definitely where this fits. But interestingly, when you mentioned SERP features, some of them stop and start So it's a case of sometimes a search engine, all of the core ones, Google, Bing, Yahoo, have released a SERP feature. Other search engines pick it up and essentially copy it because they do think it's useful for the user. But in some cases, some of them will start it and actually delay it up to 2 years, for example. So it's not a case of necessarily something just comes out, it's going to improve and be released. It's maybe a case that actually it goes back into the little cubby hole because it needs further development. And I think it's quite clear, I think most people agree, that it's still very immature and there's still a few little false positives and stuff flagging up, which is problematic.
Yeah, 100%. And just in terms of that quality importance, you know, I know that there's a lot that can be able to be improved, and we will be able to see that. But you know, for people who are agency owners and SEOs alike, part of the thing that I thought was really great that you shared, Bartosz, was, you know, on how to prepare for this. I think you said, like, you know, your 3 points, like make sure that your technical SEO, you know, is sound. Track SGE answers to your top keywords on a regular basis, and make sure that your content is digestible for AI. And I really, really love that, because I think what this really speaks to is how accessible is your data to be crawled, rendered, indexed, and parsed, so that a search engine can have a meaningful way of understanding who you are, what you represent, and how it can be able to use your text and your assets to be able to populate different things on the SERP. I want to take this next question to maybe to everyone here, because I think going back to, you know, tracking SGE answers on your top keywords. I know, you know, SimilarWeb, you've done a lot of work on this. I caught the wonderful nine things that you, anyway, a wonderful webinar that you did, Gerald, and I loved it. And you've done so much research with SimilarWeb, and of course, Bartosz, you've done a lot of experiments and things like that. I caught that little table of text and textual embeddings, I think, which was trying to find some correlations and be able to give some insights. But particularly, how are we able to actually meaningfully measure this and communicate the changes to clients?
So I'll take part of that. So first of all, I feel like the biggest challenge right now is with clients who rank well. And we have a case of a website that's a content website, ranked top 1 for most of the queries, has featured snippets, but it's never listed as a source at SGE. And I feel like this is really difficult, not only to communicate that, but to get them to start experimenting. Because first of all, you have a lot at stake. You rank very well already. So this is how we got the scripting time. Actually, we were analyzing one of the cases and we saw, okay, the only thing that was an outlier is the cost of rendering that content. And I'm assuming SGE, with such a heavy expansion, they either has to access this content separately, but it seems to be a factor. So we run it on a mass scale to double check that. If it's gonna be like this in a few months, we don't know. But at the same time, I feel like, Barry, correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like this is the first time when we know about something this big ahead of time. And for me, this is the most exciting thing ever, because we can experiment as much as we like. And I guess this is the pro of it.
Google has released some sandboxes to us, like when Google launched pre-launched their caffeine index, which is a whole revamp of how the Google search index works. They actually launched that on a sub-site to let SEOs play at it. Google has released a bunch of lab features before, nothing at this scale. Caffeine may have been at this scale in terms of the engineering behind Google, but in terms of user interface, this is like nothing at this scale. And it makes sense they launch it like this as well. So you're kind of right, nothing at this scale at all.
Yeah, and I think it's also the connection with user behavior as well. You know, it's what impact does this have on the other results online? Essentially, you know, when you think of biases, obviously you've got bias. Where's the data coming from? Is it representative of the country the searcher's located? And obviously you've got all types of bias, like, for example, rank bias, quality bias, And that can have a massive influence on the other results we actually look at and analyze online. And as a result, actually, the other elephant in the room is search engines make a lot of money from paid search. So they obviously don't want to do it on the side of actually this is actually harming our revenue status. Are people now, for example, going onto other engines like TikTok, for example, in which case actually that becomes a much more credible source for brands to start deviating their budgets. So maybe going away from a search engine, a web search engine more specifically, first budget, to actually being a multi-fragmented engine where it's starting to look at different social media, for example.
I just wanted to add one quick thing, because we need to address something very openly with our clients, and that's a lot of websites, they feed on top of the funnel queries. So like, what bike should they choose, or what to do in Rome? And I think a lot of this content is made for SEO. Like I would say 70% of the top of the funnel content, that's rough estimate, is basically content built for SEO. I don't really feel like most people would read this half-hour articles of how to choose a bike. Right now, the core thing is to communicate to our clients, and we have cases like this. This is not an easy conversation of you are feeding on this SEO content. Basically, it's not really content that people read. This is going away because Google will take over what to do in Rome, what to do in Rome with dog, what to do in Rome with, if you're gluten-free, we'll take recipes, and a lot of very simple user intents will basically stay at Google. However, they will still have to purchase, like users will still have to purchase on your website. So it's basically understanding how the user intent will change and what people will encounter on the way. That's why I find it quite exciting, actually, because we're coming back to the core in a way of showing really valuable data that has to defend itself on your website.
But on that point about users have to go to the website to purchase, I think the next step, and I think Bing, you saw with ChatGPT with plugins, Bing is super excited. Bing Search is super excited to enable in Bing Chat plugin support as well. Google will probably follow the lead, and once you have plugin support, you can just probably buy directly from. I mean, we see examples of this from Google right now. Buy now, the old checkout buttons that let people buy directly on Google Search and not have to go to the website. Ultimately, the e-commerce store, the publisher, whatever, whoever's making that money doesn't care where the transaction comes from, as long as the money goes to them. So it will be interesting to see how plugins change all this AI generative stuff so that it actually transacts with the actual publisher or e-commerce site or site owner. That's going to be super interesting to see.
There was a patent like this in 2014 or 15 where Google basically patented that they can access multiple e-commerce stores and create a faceted navigation where you can purchase something, but with Google, but when they feed on multiple different stores. So that might happen, sorry.
Definitely, and I think it's actually what we have seen in our own data. The rise of buy now, pay later is insane, particularly here actually in Europe, where the impact of the war has been a bit more impactful. But it's actually a massive shift in people's buying behavior as well. So I think it's a really interesting time when you start thinking of the political and economic situations in some parts of the world as well.
Yeah, 100%. Something that I think Glenn Gabe was talking about, maybe just going back to Google has to make money from this. He was writing about like SGE will only sort of look to roll it out if it's going to be able to net a positive profit for them. So they're looking to test various ways of incorporating ads into the SGE answer box, and maybe even including like ads or sponsored parts of as part of that answer. What do you think for that, especially in terms of like just trying to fight between organic or ads, or be able to learn from that?
Yeah, I mean, I think when everybody's rumoring and talking about the rumors around SGE, people are like, Google's revenue is going to drop, their stock price is going to be horrible, sell, advertisers are doomed. There is no way Google's going to fully launch this without being able to monetize that. And that means that people who use SGE have to be encouraged to click on links, either advertisements or organic links. If they're not clicking on one or the other, they're not clicking on both, probably. Now you see that the ads are way above a lot of these. Sometimes some examples are showing the ads way above the SGE responses and below. you're going to see Google incorporate more ways and test how clickable the ads are, as well as how clickable the listings, the organic links or sources or citations are in the actual results. I think Google's incentive to make sure the organic links in the SGE are clickable is going to be very, very, it's going to be important, very important, because if people aren't clicking on the organic links, people are probably not going to click on the ads. It's a very big generalization, but I think Google has every incentive to make sure that if they don't want their revenue to dry up, they're not going to launch this unless they get people to click on the ads. Because 90% of their revenue, 80% of their revenue comes from people clicking on ads, and that's a huge amount of revenue. So I think that's the only savior for the SEO world and SEO not being dead, is that if Google launches something that people aren't going to click on the ads, they're probably also not going to click on the organic stuff. And I think Google doesn't want to see that happen. So I think we'll be okay. But who knows? I mean, you've seen companies self-implode themselves before, so it wouldn't be the first time. But I really don't think. I think we're okay. I think that revenue thing is just so important for Google, and as it should be.
I will just add two things. First of all, is adoption rates. I don't really think that my mom is going to be using SG anytime soon. So I feel like, first of all, and I think, Barry, you published an interesting piece where they mentioned that adoption rates are mostly within very young audience. So that's one. Secondly, when it comes to revenue, I'm fairly sure that Google is going to make a lot of money just launching that, because first of all, they won't be sending a lot of traffic to recipe websites, to travel websites, to top of the funnel stuff where they pay for ads, for AdSense. So I feel like this will be, I have no idea how to estimate that, but a lot of traffic basically is going to stay with google.com, and that has to transcribe to revenue somehow.
And it's interesting, again, going back to that user behavior perspective too. You know, at the end of the day, users got used to paid search over the years, you know, where you could actually almost ignore them without having, for example, an extension on your browser. And essentially this, having a brand new interface, being super dynamic, where you've got scrolling left to right, not just infinite scroll on where's page one anymore. I think it's really interesting time for Google potentially to capitalize on this, and actually, because there's a bit of ambiguity, but like the old days of native advertising, where it was truly native and it was a very hidden sponsored result, that becomes a really interesting world for search engines.
Yeah, 100%. I would like to maybe now sort of like pan over to the EEAT: experience, expertise, authority, and trust. There is so much evidence that Google is rolling out to really reward the way that things are written for experience, by recognizing certain brands as known entities for topical authority, for authors for topical authority, and even testing things like mentioned in drop downs, similar to how like FAQ rich results would appear for websites. What are your sort of comments about how we can be able to really ensure that clients, you know, can sort of navigate this space and look at the way that they're authoring content, marking things up, and ensuring that they've got a really good handle on what that will look like with SGE?
It's a painful topic here, Nick, because they don't really play by these rules by themselves. So it's hard to address that. But basically, EEAT and all these other things aside, Google needs that knowledge graph. Oh, we can call it however we like. Any set of information that the web can agrees upon. And we can see that in queries that everything that's matched clearly or closely to the database they have has almost 100% success rate with SGE. So for us as website owners, as agencies, helping our clients structure their content, not only EAT, but with schema markups, everything possible to mark up as much content as possible will help out, because these algos are extremely dynamic. They're machine learned, not manually created. So that really helps us out to basically feed that database.
Yeah. Barry, I wondered if you have any comments with some of the things that Google is testing to further strengthen signals around this to be able to help us, provide greater evidence for clients and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, Google. When I spoke to Google about this when they first launched, they were like, I asked them, "What's the type of content that you're going to go ahead and rank in the SGE results? Are going to show up in the SGE result?" And they're like, "It's going to be the stuff we generally rank well today, the stuff that has high authority, that we could trust, all that EEAT stuff." So I mean, that's proven by Bart's study, where it shows like most of the stuff that SGE links to is in the top 10 results already, and it's the stuff that generally Google ranks today. So I think it's really continuing to do that. Now, the question is why SEOs are like, why should I go ahead and create content that Google's going to just take and use to generate answers, and I'm not going to make any benefit from it? Ultimately, the same question came up with the featured snippets. And featured snippets, Google used that and used AI, a lot of AI, to go ahead and rewrite portions of the featured snippets or to generate the featured snippets in some way based on your content. And it's similar to that, but it's a lot more in your face, and it's less clickable than it used to be. And initially, the featured snippets, when they first launched, were very not clickable. The links were tiny. They really had no. The ones we as SEOs complained loudly, they added bigger links, and everybody wanted feature snippets after that. So I think we're going to see something similar there, where if you are cited in a AI generated answer and on SGE, you're going to want, and you lose that one day, you're going to be like, oh, I want it. It's like a pride thing. And eventually, with maybe e-commerce integration or lead integration or any type of call to action integration, maybe that's going to be very valuable. I think Google and Bing are very concerned about how the publisher world is going to react when this fully goes live. So I do think there is still going to be incentive for publishers to write really great content so that it could rank well in SGE and other areas, just because I think Google and Bing are going to focus on driving as much traffic to those publishers in any way they can, like we discussed before. Maybe I'm too googly and I believe in Google too much, but I just see the other way to be too much of a downside for the success of Google in the future, as well as for the success of Bing in the future. I think they need to come out ways for publishers to want to create amazing content going forward. And that's really the only way.
It's a very interesting one. I think definitely for agencies when you speak about EAT, it's about making sure you know of websites that do a really good job of it. One, for example, we spoke about recently was Zapier. Zapier do fantastic work on best of for automation tools, which is what you would think is a very crowded market. So have a look at them. Like some of their blog posts rank for thousands of keywords that they've had for years. But the new the experience, Zapier, for example, will actually update some of their images on their website to actually account for a new beta of a software. It's insane level of detail, but that is exactly what Google and the engines look for when they speak of expertise, expert authority and trust. So definitely that's the first thing on that. I think also this is quite honestly an evolution of backlinks. So who here is creating backlinks on mobile devices? You've got countries like, for example, Switzerland, they're 58% mobile. You've got other countries like Indonesia, it's in the high 70s. Mobile is growing hugely. Search is now slowly starting to shift over to that. The only people eventually who are going to be creating backlinks are web developers and SEOs. So in essence, as a search engine trying to now think about the evolution of backlinks based on this behavior, and can they get now behavioral signals from this new SERP to try and determine what people determine as being quality.
Yeah, awesome. And I just, I want to sort of like, maybe I'm just thinking of like one of Lily Ray's like more recent tweets. When we're talking about content, Google's always said that, it doesn't necessarily care whether it's coming from a human or whether the AI, helped to be able to write that content. The advice has always been the same. If it's sort of out there for the primary purpose of manipulating ranking in search results, it's a violation of their spam policies. So really take that in consideration. ChatGPT and generative text are really useful resources, but it doesn't necessarily take away from the value that a real human can be able to provide from their perspective, from their experience, that can be able to actually, lend and be able to create some real credible value for the user. So I wanted to be able to just also bring that into the fold, because I'm sure you've had a lot of questions about, something that you just said, Bartosz, like, okay, well, if we're, considering like the knowledge graph, and we're wanting our, we're wanting our business to be related to this, to these topics, so that we can be able to pass off our products, or we want to be able to pass off our services in that kind of like really infantilized kind of perspective. Then you kind of now need to bring them into the nuance of like, oh, it's a lot greater than just like pushing out content for the sake of content. And I think that's a really, really important one to keep in mind. So any comments with that, Bartosz?
We don't have much time. We have like 4 minutes.
Yeah, sorry.
If we may, I would switch that conversation just a tiny bit for the last 4 minutes into how we can act upon all that. So first of all, I would, fight fire with fire. So first of all, if we have a lot of user-generated content, again, I would use, however we can, either ChatGPT or any AI to make Google's choice of choosing our website easier. And first of all, this is not going to help only SGE, but in general, SEO and users, because these summaries or whatever are very helpful. But to my best knowledge, Duda is doing a lot of cool stuff with AI already, and you have some cool results with how you use AI to build websites that actually rank fairly well. So I can actually forward the question to you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't work at Duda, but I can say, just at a high level, Duda's AI agency assistant, which they've recently brought out, scans content and is able to create SEO tags based on what their content is, and the business profile and the industry best practices, which I think is phenomenal. In the session on 10x efficiency that I think is on the third day, we'll have the actual founders of Duda be able to show you how that enables agencies to be able to shorten time on routine tasks, and of course be able to enhance their SEO offerings. So in that founders talk, Itai and Amir will be able to discuss how Duda really is able to embed AI into a lot of many areas of the product. Look, I think that's a really, really great place to be able to bookend things. I want to say thank you so much to all of you. And I wanted to sort of just go around and say, like, look, I think we've opened up a huge can of worms here. We've got so many great topics that can come from this. So how can people be able to interact and be able to forward you questions after this? I'll start with you, Bartosz.
Okay. So for me, it's bartosz@onely.com. Hit me up with any questions. We have a group of real hungry nerds researching SGE on a daily basis. We only had 30 minutes today, so we didn't go too deep, but this is a topic that could last the whole day. So that, Twitter, any social media. And thank you so much, folks, for having me. And thanks to my wonderful co-host as the last sentence.
Thank you. And of course, I think it really needs no introduction, but Barry, how can people be able to find you after this?
If you cannot find Barry Schwartz, you shouldn't be an SEO. Barry, don't answer that. If someone cannot find you.
Well, if you search for Barry Schwartz on Google or Google SGE, you'll find some other Barry Schwartz. So do that and you'll be fine. And great presentation, Bart, and great conversation, everybody. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. And of course, the wonderful Gerald Murphy, how can people be able to find you after this?
Yeah, absolutely love the stats in particular, Bart. Really, really love the presentation overall in the chat, everyone. Just on Twitter, Gerald Search, or actually I prefer LinkedIn, if I'm being honest. So feel free to connect anyways and ask any messages you guys want. Thank
you so much. Of course, I'm Nick Ranger. You can find me on Twitter or on LinkedIn at Nick Ranger SEO. Of course, please, if you've loved this, please hit that like button, hit that notification bell for all new videos that get rolled out. This has been DudaCon 2023. And of course, this is just day 1 of 3. So if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button because we've got some phenomenal content coming up with the next few days. Thank you so much. And of course, let's keep the chat going. Let's jump on Twitter and keep it going. Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Nick.